This is the ordinance that amends Chapter 4 of the Wasatch County General Plan. This is the central planning area and southern planning area issue that we've seen multiple times over almost a full year now. So I think we're finally down to decision time on this one as well. Doug, were you prepared to go through a brief timeline? I just want to Hey, Sheriff, can you maintain some order back there?
Can you shove everybody in the back?
He just jumped at that chance. Thank you, sir. We got the right guy, the guy with the gun back there. Problem taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Bonner, is what I meant to say.
Sure.
All right.
So this is essentially two items. We have the Ordinance 1801, which amends the general plan, Chapter 4, and changes and establishes a boundary on 650 South. And then we have the rezone proposal. So this first item, Ordinance 1801, as I mentioned, amends Chapter 4 of the general plan to establish that boundary. This was continued from the April 18th meeting to today with the following issues or things to look into. One was the Army Corps to meet out there on site with us and hopefully provide us something in writing. We did meet with Mike Pechtel from the Army Corps Bountiful office on site, Councilmember Farrell and Peterson out there with Mr. Pechtel and myself. We walked the entire 20 acres and Mr. Pechtel said, there's nothing here. And I emailed him yesterday. He said he was going to try to get us something in writing. I don't have anything. But he said in his opinion, and Mr. Farrell, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it was essentially that there's nothing here that he would ever ask for a test or an assessment of the property.
As it relates to wetlands.
As it relates to wetlands. Also, there was a fiscal analysis from the clerk's office that was asked to be provided, and a legal analysis from the attorney's office. I have the fiscal analysis in here. I just kept some of the minutes of the previous meetings. So on January 17th, 2018, there was a motion to approve the amendments to the general plan and establish that boundary. Then the same meeting where the rezone application was on, there was a motion to continue that until the ordinance to amend the general plan was approved. This is the letter from the clerk's office regarding the fiscal analysis. So it says that an average home value of $500,049.926 plus the $459,000 average land lot value would produce $8,091 in taxes, tax revenue for a primary residence and $11,342 as a secondary residence. Each unimproved lot would provide $5,164 in property tax revenue. So that's what they provided for the fiscal analysis. The attorney's analysis has been kind of an ongoing process. As we work through ordinances and whereas language, it's always given to the attorney's office, and the ordinance language that I have in the PowerPoint reflects the red line recommendations from the attorney's office, which were accepted and put in your packets as part of the final language. So as everybody's aware, unless you're new here in the audience, the proposed location of the boundary adjustment is this property here on 650 South, west of Southfield Road. You can see the LDS Church on the corner there to the east of 650 South and Southfield Road. This is a 20-acre property. This is the general plan map that shows the applicant's property that prior to the amendment was in the central planning area boundary. And the reason it was recommended to be removed is the central planning area has a lot of constraints. high groundwater, wetlands, and those constraints in the central planning area. Because of those, it's a recommendation that they stay very low density residential 20-acre lots is what our zoning requires. So the approval of the general plan amendment took that boundary and put it into the southern planning area. So I've got a picture of what that looks like. So the council action established along that yellow line, which is 650 south, a boundary between the central planning area, which would be north, and the southern planning area south, and moved just this parcel into the southern planning area. Months and months ago, as we discussed this, we determined, the council determined that that area north of 650 south that you can see in the blue hatched area would be taken out of the southern planning area, which it currently was in, and moved into the central planning area. And the piece that we're talking about now would be moved into the southern planning area. All those other areas south of 650 south would have to make a separate application to come into the southern planning area. This is part of our code in 160301B, and this basically says the general plan is a policy document for the entire county and may be amended only if the amendment is in the best interest of the residents on a countywide basis. So keep that in mind as you go through and decide what you're going to do and your findings on this ordinance language. So this is the whereas language that's been provided by the Attorney's Office. And then this is the ordinance language that would go in Chapter 4 of the General Plan. This would be in addition to the central planning area. I'm not sure I can read this, it's so small on my screen, but what it says is 650 South is hereby established as a physical boundary between the higher constrained lands in the central planning area and the less constrained lands that may be suitable for higher density development south of 650 South in the southern planning area. The low density of the central planning area is highly valued by residents of the county. The central planning area also has high constraints to development. For these reasons, 5-acre zoning is not allowed north of 650 South. The legislative body has determined to not allow with the central planning area to move north of 650 South so as to preserve A20 zoning in the north and south field, north and south fields in order to maintain the open agricultural area that maintains the rural atmosphere of Wasatch County. Due to this intentional action by the legislative body, the southern planning area's boundary is limited to 650 South and east of Spring Creek, the Spring Creek Channel. Maps 26 and 27 of the general plan identify these constraints. Other language in the general plan and the land use code in the southern and central planning areas support this boundary. The language adopted in the original general plan from 2001 that remains in the current plan and regulations for the A20 zone shows the priority of a number of legislative bodies to maintain the central planning area in its existing land use and development practices. They are, and this is in the current general plan, just reiterating it as part of this ordinance, they are, as a matter of public policy, the central planning area is to be maintained in its historical land use pattern of open meadows and river and small stream riparian habitat. The use of this area for housing and other types of development is discouraged due to the physical constraints and the higher cost of providing governmental services. The area's scenic value contributes significantly to the real value of all land within the Heber Valley area. Preservation of open space in the central planning area will also provide for the desired green belt separation between Heber City and Midway. The development code should ensure that any development along SR 113 is set well back from the road and the rural character along this road is maintained. That is specified in the code in the ordinance that says 150 feet is the required setback along state roads. Avoid excessive costs for public services in areas with high physical constraints. Preserve the beauty of the entry corridors of Wasatch County. Preserve the beauty of the entry corridors of twice. That's double important. Yeah. Maintain an open and rural buffer between Midway City. And it's essentially the same language for the southern planning area. And that's, any questions for me?
Anything for Doug? Okay. We've seen this a bunch. Have you guys got a...
Do I get to ask a question or not?
Sure. What do you got?
I'm curious, the walkthrough with the Army Corps guy, did he take soil core samples, or what did he do to determine?
He looked at the vegetation, he brought a shovel, he dug, didn't dig very deep, about this deep, and said there appears to be nothing here that would lead me to believe there's any wetland.
Can we get your name for the record, please?
Carl Sapp.
Carl Sapp. Thank you. Okay, council, it's up to us. We'll,
SAPP.
any discussion here? Matt?
Can I just ask one question? That you moved some of the south planning area up into the central planning area.
Yes.
Does that remain AR5?
No.
How do you do that with property rights of taking someone who has property at AR5 and moving to AR?
If it already had that designation, that's correct.
Okay.
But it moves it out of the southern area.
So if that's the case, but yet the general plan states that the central planning area is A20.
Doug, I'm assuming that's like a non-conforming lot of record. It's something that at a certain time has to be grandfathered. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, they still got the rights of an RA5 zone. You're right. I think.
But that piece only, correct?
Yeah, this piece only. Okay. They were zoned RA5. They were in the southern planning area, and to stay consistent with the boundary change, those were moved out.
Thank you. Okay. Not everybody at once.
Are you satisfied that the legal issue has been
That's
resolved?
Mr. Cantor.
Yeah, I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. We have our attorney's letter that we've.
You're still at risk, of course. If I were Megan Probst, I would have my lawyer run through your opinion in the contract. And here's why. If this were Montgomery County, Maryland, this would be automatic. Somebody would hire Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. They would take you down to a district court, file a lawsuit, and drag this thing on for some time. So if they're going to start spending money to improve property, and it turns out, in the off chance that Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe is correct, then they're going to be out the money, and they're going to come to you for a contribution of the money. So I'd say you have the right to ask for a second opinion from the Attorney General's office, or however you choose, but they should, for their own self-protection. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Again, this is not a public hearing, but we will always take comment, trying to be respectful. We've had multiple public hearings, and please, we'll try and keep it minimal. So.
You bet. And this pertains to this meeting specifically, which your last motion said you would get something in writing from the Army Corps of Engineers, which, as Doug just said, you haven't received anything in writing. He poked around and said he didn't see anything. That is not what you agreed to in your last motion. It was to get something in writing, which only protects the county. You have to have something in writing. To have one Army Corps employee say it's okay is not what you agreed to in your last motion, and I'm concerned as a taxpayer that we could possibly get sued based on hearsay from an employee that didn't put anything in writing. So that concerns me as a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you explain what he said, the interaction you had with that office?
Yeah. he was hesitant to provide anything in writing because typically what an Army Corps, what an employee does is when a development comes in, the developer's engineer will provide information stating here's a wetland and then here's how we delineate it, and the Army Corps will review it and say we agree or we disagree. So when we were on site and asked him to write something in writing, he said, well, let me talk to my boss, I'll see what I can do. I emailed him yesterday. He said he was in training, but he tried to get something to me. I haven't seen anything. But that's typically how they do it. It wasn't his normal protocol. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So there's no,
Back to the council.
there's no application on this at the current time for construction, which might go to that level. Is that what you're saying?
Well, typically what we do is when the subdivision comes in, if we had a map that even showed a general area for some type of high groundwater, we'd say we want some studies provided by this because there's recommendations on road and compaction and all that type of thing, and they would do it at that time. We're not at that point, but I can continue to try to get more information from Mr. Pechtel. Thank you for providing.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just,
This is Kit Kozakowski.
I would just like to ask you what you did with regard to your obligation to respond in writing to people who had put in comments. I did get a copy of the letter that was provided by the county attorney's office, and their analysis, I believe, was incorrect because they said that obligation only applied if radioactive wastes were present. And that's not correct. And, you know, here is a copy of the law, and I have a copy for everybody, if you would like one. And you can see at the very bottom of the section that spells out your obligation to respond in writing and in a substantive manner to all those providing comments as a result of the hearing required by subsection 3. And the reference to subsection 3 is what is critical. And you don't have to be an attorney to figure this out. You only have to be a very careful reader. If this requirement only applied to situations where radioactive waste was present, it would have referred to subsection 3B and 3C. But it doesn't, it refers to subsection 3, which is the entirety of that subsection, which in turn refers to section 204, which is the public hearing. It's all public hearings on all general plan amendments, not just those that relate to radioactive waste. So I just think that the county attorney's opinion did not read this carefully, and that you guys do have an obligation to respond in writing to all the people that came to the public hearing and gave oral testaments, and also people that came and provided written comments.
Thank you. Appreciate your opinion. Anything else before we move to action by the council?
I don't know if you're allowing comment. I just had a comment on the wording of the change. It seems, and I don't know if I wanted to address something Doug had said at the last meeting. So my name is Carl Sapp. Doug had brought up at the last meeting where this was brought up, that the planning zones are defined by geographical boundaries. You know, Wallsburg is within the Wallsburg Valley. I think that, you know, is obvious for all the zones. And it was brought up that this central planning zone didn't have a defining boundary. The wetlands map is not on the overlay in the PowerPoint today, but I think it was pretty clear last time that the central planning zone was defined as originally written by that USGS soil survey and wetlands boundaries. That's why it has a funny shape. You know, it's not necessarily defined by Highway 40, on the eastern side, I think Highway 40 was probably more defined by the wetland, and that you're not going to get a wagon through wet ground. You're going to go on the on the high side, and so that's kind of what, to me, has defined that planning area. And I think it would be wise for the county council to take that into consideration, because it's a defining feature that removes all liability from the county itself. USGS soil surveys, and the DNR both are the ones who do the actual geospatial mapping for Utah, telling where there are wetlands, where there are not wetlands. That particular area of wetland doesn't have a designation of like surface water. It was the lowest designation of wetland. I doubt the Army Corps would even get involved if something was built on there. You know, I agree. Whatever that assessment is, it's not a pond type wetland. I think it was defined by plant species and soil. Typically a wetland, maybe 3 feet down, there's a water table, and you have anaerobic conditions they're defining that area as a wetland. So I just wanted to bring that up. You know, obviously this is up for motion now, but to me, the county would be wise to define the wetland extent and keep that in your planning zone to prevent future, you know, property owners from coming and wanting to continue annexing.
Thank you.
We have 6 homes in that immediate, within a half a mile.
Yeah.
Quarter mile of this, and they all have septic tanks. They always put in the last 10 to 15 years, where we have a higher standard, where we got to be, our drainage fields got to be 3 feet below the water, above the water level, groundwater level.
Yeah.
So, have you looked at this property?
I did, yeah.
And how does it differ from the property south of it?
It's slightly lower in elevation. It's not, you know, I don't know. What I'm saying is, I think the mapping service of the Utah state, I'm not addressing this property specifically, I'm addressing that central planning zone as adding in a designation that is outside of the responsibility of the county and the county council.
Do you have a date on that map that you're referring to for that mapping service? 1960s?
Of which,
I don't know what
no,
you were referring to.
no, the map that I pulled up last time, no, that's 2011, something like that.
All right,
I mean,
let's come back to, thank you for your
That's something,
comment.
you
Is there
know,
anything additional?
yeah, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay. It's back to us. Let's make it, Mr. Clyde.
Real quick, Greg,
Ed Clyde.
Ed Clyde, Heber City. I own property in Northfield, and I'm a farmer. We grow alfalfa in the drylands. We grow meadow hay in the wetlands. This is alfalfa. You cannot grow alfalfa in the Northfields. You can grow alfalfa when you get out of the wetlands. This is alfalfa. And, you know, I'm concerned, you know, I respect everyone concerned about my property, but talking with a lot of the landowners in the Northfields, and there's one person who lives there, I think we should just go ahead and take this Northfield back and make it a gated community and start that process and gate that thing so that we can protect our wetlands and we can keep them green, we can continue to farm, and we're not bothering people with our cattle and stuff, and we just put the cattle guard in, the gates down, and we are a gated community. Because right now, I can't go up on the hill, it's gated, but they can come down in my field and run through the road. So I'm just saying we should incorporate, and then we don't need to vote on what we're going to do with the Northfields anymore. We don't need to worry about it anymore. We can just get on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Clyde. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I've given this a lot of thought over the last 6 months. The property in question does not have the characteristics that we find in the central planning area. We don't have the high water table as evident in the central planning area. We got development there. There's, like I said, 6 homes, we'll fit a half a mile of it, all on septic tank, and we'll have to have the alternative system. We got an oil road in front of it. In the North Field, we have a gravel road. I don't know why this was ever classified to be in the central planning area when it was done 15 years ago, when the Committee 100 drew the line. You look at it, it doesn't meet any of the criteria. So with that being said, I'll make the motion we approve the language as outlined in 1801, changing this parcel from the central planning area to the 7th planning area.
And I would second that. Now, would you go back to that map that shows the 2 pieces of property?
We have a motion by Mr. Farrell, a second by Mr. Crittenden.
Again, as Mr. Farrell just mentioned, why that zigzag alignment through there? You look at this piece, it's got central all around it, southern. I mean, no, it was and when this application came to us, it was this council that asked the folks to make the request to change the boundary, because as we looked at that, we thought, let's make a more definitive, a more defining line that makes more sense. And as we looked at the land to the south of 650 and we looked at the land to the north, 650 made a definitive line rather than the jiggy-saggy line that was there by that committee of 100. And so that's the reason I support the language and second the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Farrell and a second by Mr. Crittenden. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment. I think that I agree with Councilman Farrell about he doesn't understand why that ended up in that planning area anyway. But I strongly oppose this because I think that, I don't know those reasons, but I think it sets a very dangerous precedent for us to go changing the boundary for essentially what is for one landowner, and so I oppose it.
All right. Any further discussion before we vote? Now, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Crittenden?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries 4-2, adopting ordinance 1801. Note that Mr. Peterson was not available to vote this evening.